Gotta love that music drop. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Couch Potato Theater here on the Fandom Podcast Network, our show where we talk about all these movies that we love. We tune into them. No matter where we find them, we love to pick up on them. And that's what we are here, talking about those kind of movies that we love. And here at Couch Potato Theater, we've been doing something recently because we are huge James Cameron fans here at the Fandom Podcast Network. And over the last year, several James Cameron films have come out finally in an upgraded 4K version, including Aliens, Terminator, True Lies, and the movie we are here to talk about tonight, The Abyss. Now, if we're going to talk The Abyss, though, I need a top-notch dive team. They got to be able to go down deep, not get the shakes, be able to breathe liquid water, liquid oxygen. We'll get into that in a little bit. But I think I've put together a pretty good one. And it starts, of course, with I need my wingman. I need the guy who's going to reach into the toilet to pull out his wedding ring, even though he's very frustrated and it turns his hand completely blue. But you know what? I know I can count on him. He is the one and only co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
Wow, my hand's shaking. Is that normal? Am I going to be okay for this podcast? I don't know. I just started doing that.
Yeah. You passed all the psychological and medical tests before. You've done this a million times.
Okay, I just want to make sure this is normal.
If you start making lacerations on your arm with a big Bowie knife, we need to talk.
Good to be here. Looking forward to going down under on the abyss.
Well, you know what? We even brought in a little international flavor to our dive team for this one, because when I told him we were doing this movie, he said he must be a part of this. I'm kind of feeling like he might be the guy who built this and is just mad because we have all the valves in the wrong places or something like that. But he is the host of Type 40, the Doctor Who podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network, an all-around space bookie kind of guy, Mr. Dan Hadley.
Hello, both. Yes, you really are plunging and plumbing the depths this time, aren't you, to get me on? Good to see you both.
Well, good to have you, Dan.
Yep. Finally, too, we need a translator. We need somebody who can speak an alien language, communicate with water faces, things like that. And you know what? Nobody has more experience in knowing about that stuff just because she's the queen of movie foo. She's the co-host of Culture Clash. She's the co-host of Time Warp. She is the only one and only Lacey Adderhold.
Hello.
Welcome, Lacey.
Hello, Lacey.
I'm super stoked. I'm ready to talk about The Abyss with my special edition, super exciting version. And my
wait. Is that a signed copy of The Abyss that I see in your hand?
Yes, it is.
And who has signed that copy of The Abyss?
I had the pleasure of being Mr. Michael Biehn's driver at a convention just before the pandemic. We got stuck in traffic for about an hour and 15 minutes, and it was delightful. Got to talk about all kinds of fun stuff, and we had a blast.
Obviously, he wasn't too shaky from his flight.
No, but he signed my Abyss. He signed my Tombstone. He signed tons of stuff for me. It was great.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's how the queen of movie food rolls, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Well, volunteer for conventions, man. They will. I mean, it's so much fun. You get to do a lot of like weird stuff that you're not expecting to do. So.
Well, this is Couch Potato Theater on the Fandom Podcast Network. Either you're watching this on our YouTube channel or listening to it via one of our many audio streams, including our homepage at fpnet.podbean.com. But we are here to talk about The Abyss. But before we dive deep down that, I don't know, whatever you will call it, just look deep into The Abyss, let's tell you a little bit about what's happening on the Fandom Podcast Network. And of course, if our flagship show, Culture Clash, right now, everything is Star Wars Skeleton Crew. We are following that on a weekly basis. We're having a lot of fun with that. And tune into Culture Clash Live. We're live on YouTube on Friday nights here in the United States. And right now, like I said, it's all about Skeleton Crew. But you know what, too? We just wrapped up 2024, which means it was the end of Time Warp for that year. And for 2024, we discussed the movies of 1984, 40 years ago. I feel really old. In our most recent episode in December, we covered Beverly Hills Cop, Dune 1984, Johnny Dangerously, which we also have a great Couch Potato Theater episode out now for, and Starman. Well, I got you here real quick, Dan. Any 1984 movies that you remember fondly?
Oh, any night. This is my year. Why didn't you call me? This is my year. I mean, This may surprise you. My favourite of all of those films is Breaking 2, or Breakdance 2, as it was called in Britain, and Electric Boogaloo. Loved that at the cinema. I saw it twice. Once when it first came out, and then I went back and saw it in a double bill with the first one too. So it has to be Breaking 2 for me. Although I did see Dune at the cinema too, and Runaway as well, a late night TV classic for me. Didn't see that theatrically, but caught up with it later on. So there's some great movies there. One I've never seen too. So that's the great thing about these Time Warp shows. There are quite often films I've never heard of, or films that I just used to overlook on the shelves at the video rental shop back in the day. So yeah, it's a great show, this.
Well, Kevin, we just got educated because now we know where all the international money Breaking 2 made.
Yeah, I bet.
Oh, yeah.
I bet after he saw those movies,
It was me.
Little tiny Dan went into the kitchen and did some breakdancing, did some spins and stuff. Yeah.
Turbo Hadley. Yeah, Turbo Hadley, ladies and gentlemen.
They call me Turbo.
And as we're getting ready for 2025, we're going to take a jump back, but we're not going to go into the 80s. We're going to hit the brakes a little sooner than that, because we're going to talk about the films of 1990, starting with January 1990, which includes the cult classic Tremors, Dark Angel, and of course, one of the more interesting films of the early 1990s, Internal Affairs. All you Lady Richard Gere fans out there, you might be in for a shock when we talk about that one.
And it just came out on 4K. Internal Affairs just came out on 4K. I'm very, very stoked about that. The light and the shadow in that's going to be amazing.
Yeah, that is going to be exciting. Also, too, we talked about it earlier. We've been covering some James Cameron films for Couch Potato Theater. We've done The Terminator. We have also done Aliens, and including the Aliens expanded documentary. Well, according to Lacey, a 6+ hour documentary about the making of Aliens when you add in all the special features. Kevin, of course, is wearing the shirt for Aliens Expanded, which was a nice little online thing where you got a lot of stuff with it if you help.
Yeah, Dan, if you don't know, me and Lacey, that was a crowd-funded documentary, and we got our names on the credits, the extended credits.
Oh, okay.
And we also got a cool little packet. We got like a downloadable digital copy. We also got the T-shirt, some posters, and a really cool Aliens expanded patch.
Oh, that's great. It's nice to be appreciated. I was aware of this project when they were trying to generate interest in it, but some of these Kickstarters, they seem to sort of happen in my blind spot, and then the next thing I know, they're out and everybody's had them, and I'm thinking, where can I get hold of that? There's a RoboCop one that I want, and all sorts of others.
This is the best movie documentary companion I have ever seen. It's amazing. Check it out.
Yeah, I'm super bummed. They did one on The Thing, and I was too late to get, because I didn't know they were doing it, and I found out about it. I was like, oh, that's amazing, and I went on it, and I was like 4 days too late. I was like, oh, fine.
Well, yeah. when you've done with your 4-hour documentary on Aliens 2, we had a little fun this Christmas with The Long Kiss Goodnight, a great Samuel Jackson performance. Lacey, this was your pick for our annual Christmas show, because every year we try to have a little fun on one of our shows with Christmas. And Christmas at Jace, definitely for The Long Kiss Goodnight, and a great Samuel Jackson performance to give you a wonderful Christmas present as well. But guys, we are going to get into the main thing we're here to talk about, which is the Abyss. And guys, the Abyss got a little thing on it here. We've got a couple of movie posters that initially came out. Do you guys remember when these posters came out?
I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
This was kind of a big deal because this was like the next Cameron film. This was what was coming out, and they put out a few different posters. The one I remember most classically is the one where you see the shadow of the diver there. That was the one I really remember.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah, the quad version of that, Kyle.
This was a big deal because Aliens had come out a few years earlier, and we all loved that. We loved Terminator, and we wanted to see what James Cameron's next, foray into the theater for us was going to be. And this was a big deal. And I remember seeing that teaser poster that just had the logo saying, he made your heart pound with the Terminator, and he stopped it with the Aliens. And I thought that was a cool poster.
Do you remember the other teaser poster, which was kind of just like a shape, like a streak of light? It was very kind of minimal.
Yep.
About a year before. Well, I can't remember what the byline was on that.
Like
I don't think it even said The Abyss, Lacey. I think they just I think it said James Cameron, and that was that. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. I vaguely remember that. Yes.
And of course, for two, we have this more recent image that came out with the 4K version of The Abyss, which Kevin and Lacey are both holding up. Now, interestingly enough, and I think this is kind of important that we address this, our good friend Mr. Hadley cannot buy the 4K version of The Abyss in the United Kingdom.
What?
The movie, what is the terming you used? And maybe I'm wrong, but I could have sworn you told me it was banned.
Yes. Basically, not only can I not buy it, I can't see this film in any kind of new form. Fortunately, I do own a DVD, but like a lot of films, when it gets to a certain age and you think, I really want to watch that again, and you're aware that it's been re-released multiple times, or you see some all new, all singing, all dancing release, you think, I'll get on that. Rather than watch my old one, I'll wait for the new one. And then I saw people all over the world get this new 4K, thought, I'll have some of that. Went to look it up, and I saw, it's not being released at all in the UK. It's been refused a certificate by the BBFC. That's the British Board of Film Classification. And I had no idea why, because we have gone somewhat censorious in Britain. I don't know if word of this may have reached your shores.
Wait. I got to ask you a question. So when my wife and I, Erin, did a podcast on the 81 horror movies, because it was a plethora of great horror movies that came out. We talked about the video nasty list that the UK had put, where there's a bunch of films you couldn't get, so there was a lot of bootlegging and stuff like that. So is this kind of a version of that, but it's now updated to certain films and weird reasons why?
Sort of. I mean, censorship is censorship at the end of the day, isn't it? They know that people have seen this film. They know that people own this film, but the new crop of people who work at the BBFC have an issue with it. They've taken issue with it. They approached Lightstorm and insisted on an edit being made. So I've investigated as to why can't I see this new version? Why have I got to make do? And the story is that it's just one scene that they've got a problem with. The BBFC insisted it be cut. Lightstorm and James Cameron personally refused, because I suppose he spent months, if not years, creating these new versions. Well, you hack a scene out of it.
Should we try and guess what scene it is?
Yeah, what is it?
I'm gonna guess that it has to do with the rat. Like maybe an animal cruelty thing?
It does.
Is it really?
It is, yeah.
Okay, I figured it was either that or maybe the resuscitation scene, because there's a little bit of nipple. But wow, okay, so the rat scene. Okay.
I assumed it was something to do with nudity, because I think the initial certificate was a 12, maybe, and perhaps they wanted to either lower it or higher it, or maybe to do with some of the language or some of the, how can I put this, some of the arguments between the spouses in this get very, very fiery. And I did wonder if it was some of that people may view now, after 30-odd years, as being too charged and maybe abusive. But it turns out, no, it is the scene where there's a rat breathing underwater. It's cause for concern on grounds of animal welfare, according to the BBFC. They approached Lightstorm with this, and quite understandably, James Cameron told them where to go.
Wow.
So when they do that, though, do they just say absolutely not, or do they just have like an unrated version or an explicit label on the front, or they just disallow it altogether? If you
in this instance, it's just been disallowed altogether. Okay. I believe the BBFC, because they're connected to the government, would be very black and white about it. Yeah. They did ask, as I say, they asked for an edit to be made, which I would assume would have been just for British purposes, rather than something that would stand internationally. But understandably, I think Lightstorm, it's within their rights, it's their material, isn't it? Their IP and their product. So yeah, they are at an impasse, I think it's safe to say. And so the new physical media edition of The Abyss, either in 4K or any other format, will not be for sale in Britain anytime soon, if ever.
Wow, that's pretty mind blowing when all things considered. However, luckily, we have all been able to obtain versions of The Abyss to watch it. So let's get into the movie itself, because it's time for a little movie time cinema. And guess what? With that starts things off with our IMDb possibly vague and not always spot on plot description. So the IMDb's plot description for The Abyss: a civilian diving team is enlisted to search for a lost nuclear submarine and faces danger while encountering an alien aquatic species. I think that's fair. What do you think, guys? Kevin?
Yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah. Lacey?
It's the opposite of Armageddon. It's the opposite of Armageddon.
Yeah,
It's a good elevator pitch, as Lacey would say.
Yeah, it's 100% the opposite of Armageddon. It's adding military to the mining, and it's undersea instead of out in the cosmos. It's literally the opposite. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Well, let's talk about our first times seeing this and the movie. The first time seeing this in the theaters, and also I got a little bit of information here. The movie was released August 9th, 1989. It had a budget of $70 million estimated. It grossed in the U.S. and Canada $54 million, almost $55 million, with an opening weekend of just over $9 million. The worldwide gross was just over $90 million. So, a little interesting tidbits there. But guys, you remember the first time you watched this, and have you watched it most recently? Kevin, I'm starting with you on this.
I was opening weekend when this came out in the theaters because I couldn't wait to see what James Cameron had. There's a term that they use on a podcast that we like, Kyle, of a certain actor or director. You buy season tickets for that person because you've liked what they've seen and you're going to go see everything that they've done or directed. And I was in on James Cameron, so I was there. And then I recently watched it on 4K digital, and then I watched the special edition also on 4K or Blu-ray. Yeah.
Dan, what about you? When was the first time you saw this, and when was the most recent? How long ago has it been since you watched this recently?
exactly the same story as Kevin. I was there opening weekend for this back in 1989. Oh my! When did you say that was? 36 years? Oh. Yeah, I saw this opening weekend. Largely, sold to me on the strength of James Cameron. Couldn't wait to see what he'd come up with this time. Obviously, it was a pretty big summer. I was excited about a lot of films, and this was up there. I think I would have rented it again sort of 6 months later. So I've seen this film several times, and most recently I went back and watched it just a couple of weeks ago in preparation for this. Sadly, just on DVD though, because as I said, they won't let us have a Blu-ray and a 4K. Did I mention that? Did I mention it?
Might have to hook Dan up,
Yeah, exactly.
A little underground railroad of the new version.
This is my 21-year-old DVD that I had to wheel into play for the purposes of this. And believe me, this was ropey.
Yeah, keep that handy. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But Lacey, when was the first time, and when is the most recent time you've seen this?
I was 16 years old, and I was working at the Galleria Theater in Smyrna. And it's no longer there. It was an AMC. Actually, I don't think it was an AMC at the time. But I got to see about 2 weeks beforehand. Back then you had the plates and everything came in reels. And so you had to put the reels together, and you had to do a screening before you would show it to the public to make sure all the reels were in the right order in case they had been mislabeled in some way. And so I got about 2 weeks before the movie came out, I got to do a late night screening after hours at the movie theater, and watched it about 2 weeks before it came out during the check screen, which was they would allow 2 or 3 of the employees to be on site just to enjoy things. They would do, if you sold X number of things at the box office, or if you upgraded some, you got points and stuff. They had competitions to see who would be allowed to see the screener for that week or the next week. So I sold a bunch of popcorn, and then I got to see an early version of or an early showing of The Abyss. And then I saw it like 3 more times in the theater because, let's face it, you work for the movie theater, you're going to see things for free. And I saw it so many times. It was really fun.
I think I was. You mentioned your age, Lacey. I think I was 8. I was 18, going on 19. Yeah.
Gotcha. What was this? December? No, when was this released?
August of '89. Yeah. So my birthday was the following month. So yeah.
Right. So I turned 16 on the 31st of July. So I had just gotten my driver's license, and it was probably just allowed to go and drive to see it myself, probably. And then most recently, I watched my new 4K. But I was reminded that when I was looking it up a little while ago, I was reminded that the special editions are, I think they're numbered on the inside.
Yeah, that was we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about the special editions here shortly. But I remember the first time I saw it was in the theater with my dad opening weekend, and then most recently I did watch the 4K on digital. And guys, I do want to talk about the 4K just for a brief moment because this is one of the reasons why we have been doing these Cameron films is these 4K restores. Obviously, Dan, I know it's a little harder for you to have seen it, but this might be this might be the most beautiful 4K of these Cameron films. I truly thought this 4K transfer was absolutely breathtaking, just in the clarity of it, especially with the underwater effects. And I'm very curious for both you and Kevin, Lacey. What did you think of the 4K rendition of The Abyss?
I think so. The color, the sound, the water, the CGI of the water, which was so groundbreaking even at the time, was phenomenal. The shadows the darks really are so crisp, and the light and the values, the light. I don't even know how the color timers did it back then, much less how they look now. It's amazing. And I will say, yes, it is probably the most beautiful of all of the transfers so far. But part of that, I think, has to do with the fact that no one is eating anyone or murdering anyone or trying to blow anyone's head off. Well, with the exception of one character. But I think that it's just the storyline itself kind of gives you that, it's intense, but it's not bloody like the last few of his films, if we're going in order.
Kevin, what about you? What did you think of the 4K transfer?
So, I have a 4K TV and I can see the clarity and stuff, but this movie is basically a big blue movie when you think about it. It's got blue tint on everything. So for me, it was nice. I could definitely see the upgrade from a DVD, obviously. But I was trying to look back going, I think I did like the transfer that True Lies had, and definitely Terminator had too as well. But this one was a little harder for me to really distinguish because it's gray and blue throughout the whole movie. It's got a certain tint and a look to it for obvious reasons. But in full disclosure, I'm not a big 4K Blu-ray quality snob. I don't go in going, that 4K wasn't a good transfer. I don't care about any of that. For me, what I care about, can I see the thing on the screen, and is it better than VHS quality? And does it have good content in addition to the movie itself? That's where I stand. I want to see the story. I want to see that. I don't really give I've seen examples of Blu-ray transfers being better than so-called 4K transfers, but I don't let that get a bug up my butt because I don't care. I just want to be able to see the movie and enjoy a decent screen version of it.
So in other words, Kevin, just as long as it's better than VHS.
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, I love putting an old VHS and seeing the lines on the thing. That brings me back. I love that.
Yeah, Kevin loves playing with the tracking on the VCR.
Oh, I love it. It's great. But I still get a chance to do that. I get to hit the tracking. Yes.
I will say that there's a reason, and there's certain things that I look for when I do buy a 4K. I'm not going to buy a romantic comedy on 4K. I mean, there's just no need. You're not looking for better sound. You're not looking for more clarity. You're not looking for better, but when it comes to a good thriller or The Batman, which is at this point, The Batman is probably the most, the best quality 4K I've seen.
Does anyone remember whenever you would get a new TV or DVD set up, you would just go buy a copy of Mila Jovovich's Ultraviolet and just see if it was clear enough to watch that?
I've never seen that movie.
I always use The Fifth Element.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
Well, guys, let's get into our movie discussion and let's talk about our thoughts on this film from the first time we saw it and now. What are your thoughts on The Abyss? Dan, you are all the way on the other side of the world, so I'm going to let you start. Give me your thoughts on The Abyss as a film and just what you thought of it as a movie.
Obviously, I first saw this film when I was 16. I was 16 years of age. going to the cinema in a very heightened sense of sort of excitement and expectation. It's hard not to when you've watched The Terminator on VHS several times, rented that multiple times. And so it did come with a certain weight of expectation. Same with Aliens. It all played into there. I didn't recognize any of the actors, including Michael Biehn. That did make me a little nervous because, again, when you're a kid, or certainly when I was a kid, it was the age where the star's name was sort of in big letters across the top of a poster. But I went with it anyway, based on Cameron. As it turns out, at the cinema, I had largely the same experience way back then as I've had every time I've revisited this movie. And I think in that 35 years, I was trying to count it up. I think I've seen this film 4, maybe 5 times at a push, which isn't that often for 35 years, considering that I've always owned it as well. I used to have an ex-rental copy on VHS, then a sell-through title, and a DVD that I've had in my collection for over 20 years.
What's a sell-through title?
It.
What's a sell-through title?
Selling through to the main market. So rather than being something that would have gone through a rental shop in an outsized case, this would be at the affordable price point of £10.99. You'd be able to pick them up in supermarkets and those kind of shops. So affordably cheap VHS, which came in Britain with Batman in 1989. And The Abyss, I don't think The Abyss was actually in that initial crop. I think that may have taken a little longer because it very much sort of dripped through. But eventually it did come. But every time I watch this film, whichever age I've been, I've had the same experience. Initially, I felt when I was 16 that in many respects this wasn't the film that I'd queued up for. And I came to view it in the intervening years as my view of it changed and I took different things from it. I was simply too young to appreciate this movie when I was 16 because of the themes, the things that it focuses on, the performances. And now I'm considerably older than 16. A lot of those themes, I understand them completely. Some of them I've lived them. And yet I still find this film dissatisfying in many ways. But there's a lot that I do enjoy about it. And so it remains a mixed bag for me whenever I go back to it. And I think that's probably why I've revisited it a handful of times in comparison to other films, not just from 89, but from later or before.
Lacey, what about you? What are your thoughts on this film from seeing it initially to as over time has progressed? You're on mute.
Dang it. Okay. I kind of have the same evolution as Dan does. When I first saw it, it was I was interested in the visual effects because they were groundbreaking at the time. You knew that James Cameron had done some other groundbreaking things with Terminator and Alien and that kind of thing. Aliens, sorry. And so I was looking at it from the standpoint of, wow, pretty and cool. And a little bit of drama, whatever. So I wasn't looking at any of the overarching themes. I wasn't, as a 16-year-old, you're going to the movie to what is it? Suspension of disbelief, right? You watch it 10 years later, mid-20s, watching it, and I see it from the standpoint of the relationships and who's in the right and who's wrong, that kind of thing, and all the domestic stuff. Because there is a love story in there, right? Another 10 years, 15 years later, I see it and I look at the global aspects of it from underwater drilling and all these other things. So I take different things from it each time I've seen it. I have enjoyed it each time I've seen it, but I think that just the outside world, it really does have enough underlying points and themes that you can see it every 8 or 10 years and have a completely different relationship with the film. So I think that Dan's we have kind of the same viewing, evolution wise. And when I saw it the other night, I was really interested in the 4K, the upgrade or the scaling and everything that they did to create the 4K to see how it would compare. So I actually watched the 4K and the Blu-ray and my original DVD back to back to see what was different and what changed for me over over like 4 or 5 days. And I still enjoy it. My parents, my dad for 35 years now, anytime someone's in a hurry, he'll tell them to, keep your pantyhose on. Like, that's just what has been in our household for 35 years. And it's one of the best lines, and my dad loves it. And he will say that to anybody who's in a rush. He'll be like, keep your pantyhose on. And everyone looks at him like he's crazy because everyone's heard it, but no one remembers where it's from. And so, yeah. It's just a great, it's an interesting movie. It's fun, and it's interesting to look at. I think watching it now with the political outlook out, there's some interesting things to take from it, watching it in the last couple of weeks. But I'll continue to watch it, and I'll continue to enjoy all of the different flavors, I guess, that it has.
Kevin, what about you?
It's interesting when this movie I watched a lot more when I was younger. And I remember the alien part of it, the sci-fi part of it was what really drew me to the story and stuff. And just seeing those special effects that Cameron and his crew were able to wow us all with and get the attention of the Academy and all the fans and stuff. But then when you start watching it more, you start paying attention to the characters and their little things, and then the whole thing with coffee and the Navy SEALs and what they're really being ordered to do, and of course during this time too, we're right at the towards the end of the wall coming down there. The Berlin Wall and things changing with Russia, but there's still a little bit of Cold War thing going on here, and plus we also get the Hunt for Red October around this time as well, and so there's like a missing submarine, and the Russians have things, so that all intrigue is always very fascinating and stuff. But there's something about this film though that drags it down for me, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but part of it has to do with some timing issues as well, and also the very claustrophobic nature of the movie as well. So
I know for me, just real quick, I was actually very excited for this movie because about 2 weeks before this movie came out, there was a documentary about the making of it. I think it was on HBO or something like that, talking about all the things they did to film it and the equipment that Cameron developed. So I was very excited about that. I had watched it with my dad. My dad loves
I remember that.
And so we were very excited for this film. I remember seeing this film and being just awestruck at the underwater filming, and everything underwater was incredibly well done. I have some nitpicks about it, which I'll get into it a little bit later about this film. But this is a film that always seems to me that there's a big chunk of it I can watch at any time, no matter where I jump in. But there are parts of it that just kind of drag the film down. It's still one of my favorite Cameron films, though, just because of the technical aspect of it and the filming aspect of it. It's mind-blowing to me, and that's why I've always loved this film. And I actually think it's, for me personally, one of my favorite Ed Harris performances as well. But
yeah,
for me, that's kind of where I stand on The Abyss. But I am a little curious as to how some other people might be thinking about The Abyss, and I dug up some reviews on The Abyss here, guys. So let's see what some other people thought about this. David Anson of Newsweek, summarizing the theatrical release, wrote, "The payoff to The Abyss is pretty damn silly, a pretentious deus ex machina that leaves too many questions unanswered and evokes too many other films." On Rotten Tomatoes, The Abyss has an 89% approval rating based on 55 reviews and an average rating of 7.40 out of 10. The critical consensus states the utterly gorgeous special effects frequently overshadow the fact that The Abyss is a totally gripping, claustrophobic thriller complete with an interesting crew of characters. Mike Clark of USA Today gave the film 3 out of 4 stars and wrote, "Most of this underwater blockbuster is good, and at least 2 action set pieces are great, but the dopey wrap-up sinks the rest of the 20,000 Leagues." And then finally, I found this very interesting. Siskel and Ebert did not review The Abyss until the special edition came out in 1993. They each gave it a thumbs up. Gene Siskel remarked, "The Abyss has been approved," and Roger Ebert added, "It makes the film seem more well-rounded." So kind of a mixed bag of reviews there for The Abyss from some of the review sites, but I also dug up some movie trivia, and there's some interesting things with this. Ed Harris reportedly punched James Cameron in the face after he kept filming while he was nearly drowning. The sequence in which Catfish fires a submachine gun into the moon pool at a departing Lieutenant Coffey was filmed using live ammunition. The underwater camera was locked down and unmanned, and extreme safety precautions were in effect. This was the first movie to shop out special effects over multiple companies, 7 in total. This has since become commonplace in Hollywood as a way to spread the burden of work, allowing each company to be used to its strengths and preventing one company to get swamped in work, which can cause costly delays. At the time of this, James Cameron was also going through divorce from Gail Ann Hurd, and
She was producing the film, by the way, at the time.
And Kevin, this one's just for you. The first movie released under the THX Laserdisc program.
Yeah, Laserdisc, baby. Well, the THX version, Laserdiscs were around a little earlier than that, but yeah.
Yeah. But there's one big piece of trivia that's kind of become famous for this movie. This movie was very contentious on set. There was an article on Collider. Things might have been a bit too real on the set of The Abyss. Actors played their scenes at 33 feet, too shallow a depth for them to need decompression, and rarely stayed down for more than an hour at a time. Cameron and the 26-person underwater diving crew sank to 50 feet and stayed down for 5 hours at a time to avoid decompression sickness. They would have to hang from hoses halfway up the tank for as long as 2 hours breathing pure oxygen. Cameron, who is notorious for having brutal filming schedules, it was no different here. The cast and crew endured over 6 months of grueling 6-day, 70-hour weeks on an isolated set. At one point, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio had a physical and emotional breakdown on the set, and on another occasion, Ed Harris burst into spontaneous sobbing while driving home. Cameron himself admitted, "I knew this was going to be a hard shoot, but even I had no idea just how hard. I don't ever want to go through this again." It was pretty interesting. As production went on, to slow the pace and daily mental and physical strain of filming began to wear on the cast and crew. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio remembered, "We never started and finished any one scene in any one day." At one point, Cameron told the actors to relieve themselves in their wetsuits to save time between takes. While filming one of the many takes of Mastrantonio's character's resurrection scene, in which she was soaking wet, topless, and repeatedly being slapped and pounded on the chest, the camera ran out of film, prompting Mastrantonio to storm off the set yelling, "We're not animals!" And also, for some shots in the scene that focused on Ed Harris, he was yelling at thin air because Mastrantonio refused to film the scene again. Michael Biehn also grew frustrated by the waiting. He claimed he was in South Carolina for 5 months and only acted for 3 to 4 weeks. He remembered one day being 10 meters underwater and suddenly the lights went out. It was so black he couldn't see his hand. He couldn't surface. "I realized I might not get out of here," he said. Harris recalled, "One day we were all in our dressing rooms and people began throwing couches out the window and smashing the walls. We just had to get our frustrations out." And finally, both Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio have refused to talk too much about the film due to how much of a nightmare it was to shoot. James Cameron himself declared it the worst production he'd ever been involved in. So,
Ouch.
if you had watched the Aliens Expanded documentary or even some of the behind the scenes of Aliens, that was a very tough shoot. But this, the abuse, yeah. I mean,
it seems like what's that you got there, Lacey? You're on mute, by the way.
Wait.
Of course I am. It's a photo that the special effects department brought this up.
The abuse.
They adjusted the poster to say the abuse, and it's in. There's a huge the documentary on the 4K is. We'll just say they don't pull any punches in their descriptions and content.
It seems like Cameron bit off more than he could chew in this. He had a vision he wanted to obviously do, and by the time he just was trying to get this movie done, and the actors realized the same as well. And you know, I just that is not a set I would want to have been on.
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, I think that it comes down to when you sign on for a film like that, a lot of people don't realize some of the specifics that come along with, if you're filming in water, that's one thing if you're filming in a pool. But if you're filming underwater for X amount of time, and then just the extra hours of being underwater and not being allowed to come up, and the restrictions and all that kind of stuff. That's a mind. Well, I can't say it because we're on a G-rated thing, but it's
really.
It's a mind fro. It's a mind frack. It's a whole kinds of things.
Because I mean, and they said Michael, I think it was Michael Biehn said that some of the crew members, cast and crew, had experienced like PTSD to a point where they brought someone from the CIA in to help them, one of the people that helps you deal with having been tortured, to help them get through some of the PTSD.
Yeah.
This was definitely notorious for that. Come on, Dan, we know you were a production assistant on The Abyss.
I claim no knowledge. God, that sounds like a bloody nightmare. I mean, I have heard talk about Cameron's behavior and about he may not be what they call an actor's director. I think didn't he get into a fist fight with Tom Arnold on the set of True Lies? Yeah, there's all these different. There's
I don't think that happened.
There's little pockets of disarray here and there that you hear about, and you do wonder. I can understand why he would get into it in such an intense way, not just creatively, but obviously business-wise as well. That this cost a lot of money to make. Time is money, all that. But it does seem like a bit of a nightmare for everybody involved. And I do hope they're all over it now. I mean, I know it's a long time, but that kind of thing can scar people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's say I don't think any of them are going back for a sequel. But guys, let's move on. Let's talk about our favorite scenes, movie quotes here. But I have, before we get started with this, I have one question that I do want to each ask of you. Is this the greatest underwater film ever? And I'm kind of curious of your guys' takes on this, because I think you can see it in different ways. But Dan, I'm going to start with you. Is this the greatest underwater film ever?
Maybe. And speaking as somebody who, I'm pretty lukewarm to this film, to tell you the truth, for a lot of the reasons that the reviewers that you read out the takes on a few moments ago, for a lot of those reasons, it probably is. Technically, I'd say it definitely is. Does it sweep me up in the way that I would wish it to? I mean, I've been more excited by far cheaper films than this, and by films as well that aren't maybe as worthy. I enjoy Aquaman more than this, but I do think this is this is clearly the better film. I enjoy stuff like Warlords of Atlantis more. And there's several. I mean, what's the film Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the Owen Allen thing? I think that's more entertaining than this, more entertainment value. Technically, it certainly is. I don't think I know enough underwater movies to make the most informed classification there. It wouldn't surprise me if it was. I mean, it is incredible to look at, and even now you do wonder how on earth they achieved what they achieved, under what conditions, because you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell from watching the film back. And after 35 years, that really is something. Usually you're able to piece it all together, but no, it is incredible what they achieved. I hope it was worth it.
Lacey, you are the queen of movie foo for a reason. Is this the greatest underwater film ever?
I think that this is definitely going to be the first one that people say. You say, what's a movie that's filmed underwater, or a movie that takes place underwater? The first thing they're going to say is The Abyss. I think that's the first one that's going to come to mind. I think that more recently you've got The Meg 2. Those are great. They're big underwater. There's a lot of action. There's a shark instead of aliens, but I think there's some interesting things to be done and to be said for that. It's more of a popcorn movie per se than The Abyss is. For my money, though, it's going to be Leviathan. Leviathan is just some of the. It's basically it's Aliens meets The Abyss, and I think that I don't know. It might be neck and neck with The Abyss, Abyss and Leviathan. The only one that comes to mind other than that would be like what is it? Deep Star 6. That's
I was gonna pick. I was figuring that was Kevin's pick for best underwater.
Never seen either of those.
Leviathan. Oh, Leviathan is fantastic. It's
I
basically
mean, that sounds like the film that I wanted in '89. Funnily enough,
and Peter Weller is the main character. The main actor. It's a great flick. But yeah, Deep Star 6 also has some of those like really cool, like vibey, creepy, underwater, claustrophobic, kind of things. This is more. The Abyss is more of a thriller underwater, as opposed to you've
That's
got
how I see it.
is the horror movie underwater. The Meg is the action adventure, like Animal Beast kind of thing, and Deep Star 6 is kind of like a combination of all of those. It's action, it's adventure, it's creepy. It's got
Lacey, if it hadn't have been for the interpersonal drama, this time watching it, I may have even had to switch it off and watch it in shifts. I found it that hard to get through. The visuals weren't enough this time.
I feel like if and when, we're going to say when we figure out a way to get you a 4K copy, that's going to make the difference.
Don't get arrested, Lacey.
Yeah, great. Kevin, what
Running
about you?
contraband.
When you come over here, you can watch it, and that will be the change. Yeah.
Kevin, what about you? What are your thoughts? Is this the greatest underwater movie ever?
No, it's not. Not by a mile. I when I think underwater too, I go to submarine movies. I loved World War II submarine movies, Run Silent, Run Deep. And there's been so many good ones. And I think the one that really kind of brought us there was The Hunt for Red October, because so much of that drama in that series or that movie takes place underwater between submarines. And I would even go with the Poseidon Adventure, the original one. Even the remake was okay as well, because a lot of that takes place underwater too. That's where I go. This one too is obviously is an underwater film, but to me it doesn't even reach those.
Also, movie
Lacey?
Underwater with Kristen Stewart.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
We kept saying underwater. And
does Deep Rising count? That was a good one.
Deep Rising, The Girl from Ipanema. That's one of the Treat Williams, man. Yes, Kevin J. O'Connor.
For me, I think visually, The Abyss is the best underwater film, but I don't know if it's the best underwater story. You mentioned Underwater with Kristen Stewart. I think that's maybe the best, most recent underwater film. And if you're going to add in the submarine side of it, I'm a huge fan of Crimson.
No one's talking about the Kristen Stewart movie. Come on,
dude, that movie was really good.
Yeah, whatever.
I've
no one's talking
about
it. Come on.
I do like Kristen Stewart. So
that wasn't even on my radar. It's not on my radar. It doesn't count.
Oh.
I do think that there's a lot to be said for Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I know that's a family movie.
Yeah. Any of the 20, anything with the submarine stuff, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, anything with oh no, I can't remember his name. Nemo, Captain Nemo. I mean, anything with Nemo. That's awesome.
Well, guys, let's talk about some of our favorite scenes in the movie. For me, most of my favorite scenes it's more about the visuals of this. I love the shot of seeing the underwater city for the first time. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. Everything that they do with the submarines, I think it is amazing. Just the equipment, everything underwater is just beautiful. But what about your favorite scenes? Do you have a favorite scene, Lacey, that from this film that?
Yeah. Okay. So, the keep your pantyhose on. It's going to be great. I do love, just the fight when Ed Harris comes up, when Virgil comes up into the, what do they call it? The bay, where Michael Biehn, when Coffey's got he's got his gun and he's got the weapon and everything, and he's trying to get everything ready to go and blow things up or whatever after he's got his sickness going on. That fight is, I know that they choreographed it, I get it, but it looked like a real fight.
It's intense, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was like scratching and grabbing, and everyone, they were wet, so it was like they couldn't land their punches properly, and it was a really, really intense fight, and I very much appreciated the struggle, because knowing from the film side of things, working in a film and seeing how fight choreography works, all that kind of stuff, that's a tough scene to film. Like, that's a really tough scene to act, especially if you can't land your punches properly, or if you can't, like, when your feet aren't properly, stationary because the floor is wet, and you accidentally end up, because they said multiple times that they would accidentally clock each other. That's a hard thing to do. That's a really cool scene. And then you've got, oh gosh, I'm so bad with the actor's name. He comes up, he makes his way in there, and Tex comes in, finally kind of fixes the problem and handles it. But that's a great fight scene.
Dan, what about you? Any favorite scenes?
Yeah, a standout scene for me. I mean, the main issue that I've got with this movie is that it's got kind of Lord of the Rings syndrome. It's got about 3 different endings. And for me, this film dramatically peaks at a particular point. And it's my favourite scene, and it's because of the acting. And it's the sequence, they're underwater, so it's Ed Harris, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. They haven't even spoken. We just understand as viewers that they are deeply in love and connected to one another, that they trust one another implicitly, even if they couldn't live with one another. And air is running out, water is coming in, and she is prepared to drown and to trust him to get her body, her lifeless body, to the surface to be resuscitated. That scene is electrifying in every way. And not only is it's incredible how they managed to pull it off technically, it's still thinking, how on earth would they have done that? I'm totally captivated by it. It's very, obviously it's isolated, very claustrophobic, that goes without saying. But it's the intensity of the performance between those 2 actors to make me believe not only that they are in the situation that they are in, but that they feel the way that they do. And that complex nest of human feelings that can only come when you've been in a complicated relationship with someone, which is something that I could write the book about. So that really chimed with me on a personal level. I feel the drama is never better than then, even when she's being resuscitated later on, and it looks like she's gone. But even then, I think the film peaks then, and that whole chain of events after that, I'm sort of spent visually and emotionally. It's a superb sequence of events that really brought me back into the movie at a time where I was kind of dining out a little bit. And what superb actors, the pair of them.
Kevin, what about you? Any favorite scenes?
Yeah, mine is when because we see in the beginning of the film what happens with the submarine, and then the problem starts. They have the encounter with the aliens, whatever it is, and it's sinking. I love the approach when they're approaching the submarine, and you have Michael Biehn's team going in there, and then you see the bodies. And how it's in just being down there, how it affects certain people, and you got the creepy scene with the crabs coming out of the one corpse and stuff like that. That scene always gets to me, because that when you go down to a submarine that has not resurfaced and everyone's dead, you're in for some good drama there.
Yep. Well, one of my favorite scenes too is the sub chase between Ed Harris's character and when he's chasing Michael Biehn's. That whole sub chase was just done absolutely well. But guys, there is something else with The Abyss that we need to talk about, and that leads into a segment I designed for Couch Potato Theater. The multiversal madness of it all, aka cutscenes, alternate endings, or director's cuts.
I was wondering where you're going to go with this, Kyle.
The Abyss has one of the more famous special editions out there. A special edition that I feel really does dramatically change several aspects of this movie. In 1992, the alternate version was released with 28 minutes of new material, which at that time, that's quite a bit of new material in a special edition, because this is before Lord of the Rings and Peter Jackson. Here's some of just a few of the things that I think are kind of important when that they add into this special edition. And you've seen with Bud and Lindsay Lindsay's breakup is inserted before Bud throws his wedding ring in the toilet. Bud shows Lindsay to her room and asks whether she is still seeing her new boyfriend. They begin having a discussion about why they broke up in the first place, and it turns into an argument. They exchange comments, and then Bud leaves the room. After Lieutenant Coffee explains the mission to the crew, Bud confronts him and suggests that he go easier on the crew. Coffee informs Bud that they will continue to do things his way. This scene increases the tension between Bud and Coffee. Bud goes into the next room where a crew member makes a comment on his purple hand. A new scene showing Coffee and his men opening the missile hatch to retrieve a nuclear weapon from the sunken Navy submarine. I think that's very key. Once the rig has come to the rest on the edge of the abyss after the accident with the crane, a new scene shows Bud, Hippie, and One Night surveying the damage using an ROV. They locate a wrecked mini sub and a dead crewman. Hippie asks if they're just going to leave him there, and Bud replies they have to worry about restoring the power and getting air first. Once the crew has caught on to Coffee's plan, a new scene shows Hippie walking down a passageway and finding the warhead missing from Coffee's room. We then see Coffee carrying the warhead down the hallway. When Lindsay is talking to Bud over the intercom during his descent, Lindsay talks for a bit and then says, "Sorry, I'm rambling." A brief type response from Bud was inserted after this. "You always did talk too much." During Bud's descent into the abyss, the pressure begins to affect him and his link with the surface. In the original film, when the crew realizes something is wrong, they ask if Bud can still hear them, and his typed response is just gibberish. A brief new bit of dialogue has been inserted just before this. Bud types, "You're going away," and Lindsay replies, "No, I'm not. I'm right here, Bud."
Kyle, real quick. I was looking at this. There's like 21 things that they inserted into this extended version with an extra 20 minutes of footage to this thing.
30 minutes.
I remember when this came out and I was going, you know what? This is probably like one of the coolest things they could have done to this movie. I think I flipped on that.
Really? Well,
yeah.
A couple of the other big things is there's a very large scene when Bud is rescued by the aliens and they're talking to him and they show him all this TV footage and everything of that nature as they're trying to get understand what's wrong with the human race, or an explanation of the human race, and the fact that the aliens have also launched this tidal wave towards cities like New York and San Francisco, and Bud is trying to talk them out of destroying the human race. There's also a very brief piece of dialogue from Hippie that has been inserted just before One Night sees Bud's transmission on the monitor. He says, "I wish I could have seen it. I mean, how do you stop a 1,000-foot tidal wave?" And then after Bud contacts the rig and informs everyone about the aliens, several new lines of dialogue were inserted as Lindsay reads Bud's messages and discovers the true purpose of the aliens. Bud types that the aliens have left us alone until now, and it bothers them to see us hurting each other. He says that the aliens sent us a message and hope you got it, and they want us to grow up and put away childish things, referring to nuclear weapons. When the crew of the Explorer hears this, one of the crew members jokes to the Navy officer, "Looks like you boys might be out of a job." And finally, as the alien ship rises out of the abyss, some brief footage has been inserted as it rises in front of the rig. We see beams of intense light streaming into the rig's windows, and Lindsay looks at her hands as if something in the light is affecting her. This could account for the dialogue between Lindsay and Hippie. When they exit the rig, Lindsay says, "We didn't depressurize. We should be dead." Hippie says, "Maybe they did something to us." To which Lindsay replies, "Yeah, I think you could say that." So there is one other alternate version of this, though, movie guys. The airline version of The Abyss was supervised by Cameron himself and runs 118 minutes. Since you can't show a vehicle crashing in a movie shown on an airplane, all the opening scenes of the submarine incident had to be removed and the title sequence changed. The airline version begins with shots of helicopters landing at the rig. The same version has been used for network TV showings. So, guys, I'm assuming we have all watched the special edition. Kevin, you kind of weighed in. Your preference sounds like it's the original version, not the special edition.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be swayed when you see new scenes of a movie already, because it's like seeing like a brand new version of it, But then when you kind of put it into context and you realize, were they necessary? And as I have gotten older and looked at different versions, whether it was the director's cut or the theatrical cut, you kind of weigh them and you pick your favorite or whatever. And, and then you kind of start looking at the scenes. Were they really important for the film, or were they just kind of neat to see? And I'm looking at all this list here. There's like 21 different things that they added to this thing. And it's like, they were kind of like, extended scenes and maybe extra lines of dialogue. I don't know if that necessarily be there, but when it completely changes a film, when a scene is in there and it completely changes a film, that's when it gets interesting.
Lacey, what about you? Are you more a fan of the original cut or the special edition?
I can watch the original cut if I'm in a pinch and I got things to do or something, if I'm just on a time crunch. But I think that the special edition, because I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that there are a lot of special editions that are unnecessary. I didn't like the additional stuff on Alien because I didn't think they needed to soften her. Right? I think the original cut was a good cut.
You mean Aliens?
Yeah. Aliens, yes. What did I say? Oh, did I say Alien? I do it every time because in my mind, Aliens is the only Alien movie. Sorry, that's a different podcast. You can watch that on podcast. Yeah. Okay, so I would say that the extra content in this gives us more relationships. It gives us the history. This, I think that when it comes down to it, no matter when you watch it, it's about relationships. It's our relationship with the earth. You've got relationships between, like civilians versus government. You've got interpersonal relationships, whether they're, husband and wife or friendships, things like that. You've got the fact that some people just rub each other the wrong way. You've got the aliens' relationships with the humans. You've got all these different things. And I think that backstory helps all of those things. The more information you have with relationships in this movie, the more you have, the more empathy you have with the characters that you choose, because everyone has to pick the characters that they relate to when they watch a movie like this. Otherwise, you're just watching big blue blobs of things happening and go, okay, great, at the end. So I liked all the extra stuff. The only thing that in the special edition that I thought was a little bit, the video screens, it kind of felt like the movie Explorers when the kids get to the alien spaceship and they find out that aliens have learned how to speak English by watching like television shows. So it was there was a little bit of like reflection there that kind of took me out of it a little bit. Not in a bad way necessarily, but it just made me go, oh, that's not like, Explorers. Cool. So yeah, I like I'll go with the extended edition.
Dan, what about you? Special edition or original cut?
Well, when it came to watching it this time, it's been a long time since I've seen the special edition. I have seen it, and that is the DVD is the special edition. It's a 2-disc special edition, so I did have the option. But because I was watching this sort of compromised on a fabulous new 4K TV, 50-odd inch TV in 2024, and popping in this DVD, which is 22, 23 years old, I immediately noticed not only is it not anamorphic, but the picture quality is really quite bad. And so given the fact that I was already committing myself to an entire evening watching this film again, which, as I say, I've always been a little bit lukewarm too, I thought, hey, do I really want to watch another half an hour's worth of this in that state? So in this instance, I deliberately went for the theatrical cut to save myself a bit of time, going to get something which is really starting to look its age. The DVD I'm talking about more than the film itself. So that's the main reason why. Will I ever watch the director's cut, the special edition? Maybe if I get that 4K that Lacey's gonna sneak over in her backpack whenever that is. I don't know. Maybe I will. I don't like the film enough to tell you the truth. I'll probably watch it again, maybe. I don't know. But right now, I'm very happy with the version of the film that I watched a little while ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was an entertaining evening. I enjoyed it up to a point, and so I don't feel shortchanged by the fact I didn't see all that stuff. But hearing you recount it, actually, Kyle, it does add something to it. I can't deny. So yeah, I didn't watch it this time. I might do it next time. There we go.
I feel like the next time that I go to the UK, I'm going to be filling out the paperwork on the plane, and it's going to say, do you have any fresh fruit? Do you have any copies of The Abyss? Like, I feel like there's going to be just very, because can you imagine?
Have you anything to declare, madam? Well,
right?
Kevin?
Oh, I'm going to wait for the vehicle section of this podcast to say my comment. I'm going to wait for that.
Okay. Well, I just want to add in for me, I am a fan of the special edition because I do think it fleshes out the relationships more. And I think it fleshes out the aliens more. It makes the aliens more interesting in this special edition. But guys, let's talk.
Hold on. I got a thing I want to say about that. I get that. But I think the most interesting thing about the Abyss is not the aliens. I think it's the people on this thing, the problem they're having with the SEAL guys, and the struggle they are having to stay alive. I realize you have to have the aliens, that's part of it and stuff like that. And I used to think that, seeing more of the aliens and getting more of their behind it would be interesting. But if we had a sequel, then maybe we dive into that. But
see, for my money, Kev, the aliens actually muddy the waters of this, because watching a movie back like this, I wonder, because I look at my own responses at the different points in my life, and I think, well, if it wasn't for 16-year-old me, and it's not for 50-year-old me, and it wasn't really for 30-odd-year-old me, who is this for? And I think that the conclusion of that and the realization of the aliens, certainly in the form that I've ever seen it, the way that they are visually on screen, the things that they do, that which they respond to, their technology, it kind of looks and feels like a kid's film. And yet the 2 hours that I've watched up to that point is this sort of sense of wonder in the way that, so you can say that Close Encounters does that, E.T. does that, but it actually feels more like it's trying to be that scene in Star Trek: The Motion Picture where Spock goes through that giant sort of sprawling V'ger. I think that's what Cameron wanted to promote in me. But what I actually felt was it was more like I was watching a film about magical sort of angels or something that was more like that movie where Robin Williams goes to the afterlife. It felt more like that. It felt more fantastical than anything that was sort of scientific or had anything deeper to say. I could have lived without the aliens, or seeing less of them, or not seeing anything past that point where he sees the alien city. If he'd have blacked out at that point and we'd not seen anything else, I think it might have been, for me, it might have been a better movie.
I think the aliens come in at the very end. When it comes to diving, and because Cameron is so into diving and he's such a clear, like, he likes to make sure that everything is done, photo real. Like, he wants to make sure that he doesn't cut any corners when it comes to the reality of diving, or anything else that he does in his films. I think that there's no way to save Ed Harris in the end without using some sort of extraterrestrial or magical or fantastical something. And I think that might be, if someone has a struggle with this movie, that might be wise, because they're saying, well, this movie was action adventure, or not action adventure, but it was a thriller adventure underwater, drama.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, 48 minutes in before you see the sparkle. And then after that, you have to wait another 40 minutes before you get to the bottom, and you realize that that's a whole city.
It's not much of a payoff, and for me, it feels like tonally a bit of a handbrake turn.
We're gonna get at that more, because I have another time I want to bring this up. But guys, let's talk about the cast and crew real quick here, because I think if you're talking about what makes The Abyss so good, it's the cast. This is a phenomenal cast. Yeah. This cast has amazing chemistry. It's one of my favorite Ed Harris performances. And even though most of this cast aren't superstars at the time that this is done, and a lot of them really didn't basically play character roles throughout their careers, there's just something about this cast that feels real, and that they really did bond through this. Obviously, they went through a lot of trauma, but there's a genuine feeling about this cast that I really love. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
I find the supporting cast more entertaining, personally, because they each had moments. I liked them. The guy with the rat, I like him. The Tex guy, or whatever it is, I'm forgetting. I don't know their names. I'm sorry, but I thought they were cool, and I do want to give a shout out to Michael Biehn for playing, like, he doesn't play a lot of bad guys that I've seen. But this was a good role for him, and you get to see how working underwater takes its toll, and it definitely did on him.
Speaking of working underwater, Kevin, it's an hour in. I need to check your arm.
It's fine. It's fine.
No. I need you to turn it for the YouTubers. Make sure there's no marks anywhere on there.
It's fine. It's fine, dude. It's fine.
Lacey, what about you? What are your thoughts on the cast?
Oh my goodness. The cast is fantastic. One Night is one of my favorites. Like some of her little like sarcastic line drop, like she just drops stuff and walks away. Like some of those lines that she has, like they're great. Like knowing that she obviously, it's not just Ed Harris's character that has seen the relationship and been involved in the relationship with Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio's character. It's the entire crew realizes that mom and dad are going to be in the same room again, and this is going to be bad. It really does kind of have that air of, when you're down underwater, you're with like 6 people, they're down there for months at a time. So everyone is experiencing the strain of this relationship between Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. And I think that everyone has different ways of showing it. And I love One Night and her little comments here and there where she's just like, fine. She's great.
Dan, what about you? Your thoughts on the cast?
Oh, it's the same. Excellent. Every single one of them, no matter how much or how little they were given to do or say, the characterization is absolutely superb. And because Cameron wrote this as well, didn't he? Yeah. He's really good. He's really good at putting together casts and stitching together people that he's created, in some instances with minimal dialogue as well. Sometimes less is more. And I think that Cameron, for somebody who's so excessive in other ways, I think he's kind of a low-level master at that. It's superb, and they're all fantastic. There are people in this I had seen before, I just didn't recognise them. I mean, that moustache on Michael Biehn, wow. And the people I would see afterwards, of course. But in that moment when you're watching this movie, they are their characters. You do feel like you're there with them. I think the spell works beautifully, and it's just as much because of them as any of the technical things on screen.
Yeah, no, I agree. All good points. So one thing I will say about Cameron is nobody puts an ensemble cast together like James Cameron. No. He does a fantastic job with it. But guys, speaking of casting, it's time for one of my favorite things here on Couch Potato Theater. Do you think we need one? The Ocean's 11. Do you think we need one more? For you that know. Basically, we were just taking the concept of Ocean's 11. Do we need to add one more person into this cast who was popular at the time? Dan, this is your first time experiencing this. So, for example, I'll go first here real quick. If I was going to add somebody to this cast who was popular at the time, but I didn't want to get I don't necessarily want to get a huge name that's going to overshadow Ed Harris or some of the other characters, I would go with William Hurt. I would love to see him have been the captain on the ship above, or maybe even like the man in charge of Coffee's unit that he's reaching out to.
Kind of an authority figure, a more distant authority figure.
Yeah,
that they all would have to answer to.
The other person I'd throw in is I would have been very intrigued to see Bob Hoskins in this film as maybe like an old mechanic on the rig or something like that, kind of a mentor to Ed Harris's character. I think that would have been interesting as well. But Lacey, would you add anybody to the cast, and if you would, who?
If I was going to add someone to this cast, it would just be for the sake of having someone who's worked with Cameron so many times in all of his movies, and I would just go with Bill Paxton. Put Paxton in there, maybe replace Chris Elliott's character, just something small, because, at that point he was, Paxton was getting kind of a little bit more.
I wouldn't have put him on the ship, because then he was on the ship on Titanic, trying to find the Titanic, and he would have just been I'm the Cameron on the ship guy. I would have put him underwater.
Well, but at the time he hadn't done Titanic.
I know.
So at the time, it would have been him on the top. I think that when it comes to putting him underwater, he would have ended up being a Marine, and that would have been too much of, you don't want to take 2 Marines from Aliens and put them in as Marines again. You've already got Michael Biehn playing the Marine and then playing the Navy SEAL. So I don't know. I think that if I was going to add somebody, it would be Bill Paxton. But other than that, I don't think there's any sort of necessity to add anyone new. I think everybody was cast perfectly. Even the whole cast above water, the struggles that you could see with them arguing and, on the horn trying to talk down. Everything was good.
Dan, what about you? Is there anybody who you can think of that you might have added to the cast at the time?
Well, given the fact that we all know that everything is better if Christopher Walken's in it. Other than that, I am struggling because as much as I've just said that I love the cast, I can't imagine there being another character. I do everything that I said a moment ago about how much I like the actors, how much of a great job I think they all did. I think there was, if anything, there were too many characters. I could have done with one or two less, if anything. I can't imagine there being anybody else. So, no, in my instance, I don't necessarily think we need another one, but results may vary.
Christopher Walken needed to play the alien.
Yeah,
There you go.
The voice of the
Kevin?
aliens.
Okay, so I need to ask you a question first, Kyle.
Yes.
Before I answer that question, I recently changed this category. All disclosure in our recent notes that we did with a previous podcast, to where you could have your choice. You can either add someone to the cast or you could replace someone in the cast with someone else, and you come up with that person. That's where I'm at with this. I want to replace someone, but I don't know if you want to do it in this segment or the next segment.
No, we can do it in this segment.
Okay. All right. So I would replace someone. This might be a hot take, but I'm going to say it here. I would replace Ed Harris in this.
Really?
Really?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
That's a tough sell, mate.
Yeah, it is. I love Ed Harris, but this is not my favorite Ed Harris film. I really liked him in Appaloosa and some other stuff. But I was trying to figure out who would I like to see, because first of all, I'm not buying that these two are married. There's an 8-year difference between these two. He's ugly AF. He's not a handsome man.
Yeah.
Right? This is my opinion. My opinion here. I just don't buy them as a couple in this. And so I was looking at your list, Kyle. I'm going, you know what? Who I would have really have liked to seen him be replaced by. And my take is I would say Dennis Quaid, because Dennis Quaid, there's not an 8-year difference between Mary Lewis and Mary.
Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
Yeah. There's only a 4-year difference in this. And I feel like during this time, he really could have used this type of movie. And I really think that he could have played that role, in my opinion, a little bit different tone. And I think he would have been a lot more likable, because Ed Harris for me is not likable in this film. And I'm looking back at Dennis Quaid's career during this time. So he does DOA in 1988. He does Inner Space in 87. And then he does like Great Balls of Fire, where he's Jerry Lee Lewis. Everyone's All American. And then 1990, he does Come See the Paradise and Postcards from the Edge. This is a win he should have gotten if he did a film like this. And I think the chemistry would have been a lot better personally between those two than Ed Harris and Mary.
Interesting. Well, that kind of leads into our next segment here too, which is the Tom Selleck was Indiana Jones segment. Who almost got the role or who passed on it? And there's some interesting casting notes for this particular movie. Starting first with Commander DeMarco, was written for Lance Henriksen, but he was unavailable for the project. More interesting, Kevin, you talk about somebody else playing the Bud character. A couple other choices were Jeff Bridges and Mel Gibson, in case Ed Harris was not available.
He would have been good, not Mel, but yeah,
Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, Jeff. I would have gone with Jeff as well.
So, and then in the main female lead, Jamie Lee Curtis was highly considered for the role, but yeah, the thing is that Catherine Bigelow, James Cameron's future wife, had already cast her in Blue Steel. Then Cameron would later cast Jamie Lee in True Lies, so I think it worked out well for everybody in that category. But
yeah.
Up next, Kevin, I know you had some thoughts on this. We want to talk about the types of vehicles we had in this, and I'm going to be honest with you. I love the underwater things, from the rig to the different subs, from flatbed to the mini sub to even Little Geek. Kevin, I am a fan of the subs in this movie. You have thoughts on the vehicles?
Yeah, I do. First of all, for me to like these vehicles, I would want to be in them, and I don't want any part of these vehicles whatsoever. I'm sorry. I don't care how cool they look. Even submarines creep me out. I've been in a submarine once, but it was docked at a dry thing, and it wasn't underwater. Kyle, I think you missed a really cool vehicle that I thought was really neat, but it reminded me of one that we saw again later in 1999 in a movie called Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The alien ship thing that buzzes up to Lindsay's character, and she kind of touches, looks a lot like the Gungans Bongo underwater submarine. Do me a favor, look at it again, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And I'm just wondering, going, if Lucas is watching this, he's going, you know what? I think I could borrow that. They are very similar, and I think it's very cool.
Dan, any of your favorite vehicles you have here?
Similar to you, really. I thought it was all wonderful to watch. I like the fact that we could see, and I remember the talk around this movie at the time being that the gear, the helmets and things were deliberately designed so we could see the actors' faces more so to look semi-futuristic. And I think that's probably carried through to a lesser extent to the craft as well, because they've got enough of the kind of Thunderbirds about them to be slightly fantastical, but look practical as well, as if it's feasible that they could have, for all I know, these were working things that we have now. I don't know. But there's lots of cool little things here and there. But I just like the general look of it. It all feels like it all belongs. Everything is belonging of one another. And so the fact that it all works, yeah.
Lacey, are there any of these vehicles that you're taking it out for a little Sunday submarine joyride?
Can we qualify Ed Harris as a vehicle since he towed Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio back to the port? Because
no, we're not going there. This is a still family friendly podcast, Lacey.
Yeah.
So
Is Lacey?
Saying he's somebody that's a vehicle. No, I don't know. I think that a submarine's a submarine. Call me crazy. I am claustrophobic and not a fan of any sort of scuba anything. So, the beach and I are not friends. The ocean and I not big chaps. So, probably not going to find me anywhere near any of these vehicles.
There you go. I was a fan of the flatbed specifically, but I just love the design and the practicality of it. But yeah, but guys, that brings us on to the next section. So hot right now. The Zoolander, they look so hot right now. Favorite costume or fashion moment, and it's not really about the fashion moment, but it is about the suits and the technology. And this is something that James Cameron has always been big on, and this is what makes his movies so good in my opinion. But the helmets and backpants were designed and built by some of the top producers of professional dive gear, such as Western Space Marine and Kirby Morgan. The equipment they used was specially built for the cast, since Cameron wanted the audience to very easily recognize the actors while wearing the helmets. For that, the helmets had a large visor or spaceport, which allowed for very easy recognition and seeing of the actors' faces. The helmets also came with other advantages, such as a servo-controlled demand regulator, a headset microphone and speaker that was similar to the ones used in military helicopters and fighter jets, which allowed the actors to speak and to have their dialogue recorded and speak back to converse with fellow actors, but not to Cameron, since his helmet was able to communicate with the actors and various stations topside or to the safety divers and crewmen by underwater loudspeakers. And a bright helmet light that had a special mirror inside the housing to shine the light on the actor's face. The backpacks were also somewhat futuristic looking and had batteries to power the light on the helmet, which was plugged in by a cord that connected to the helmet and backpack. It was capable of being refilled while underwater, so the cast can stay longer without having to resurface, and a compressor inside to provide air for the helmet. This equipment was a pretty big deal at the time because it became cutting edge, and a lot of people actually started wanting to use this equipment for diving, and a lot of industry, like especially diving industrial work, and even the military looked at some of these equipments that were being used by Cameron in this. I mean, the suits were definitely cutting edge technology, Kevin.
Yeah, and I think I feel like stuff that he did for finding the Titanic and other things. He's always on the cutting edge of, whatever it is that he's doing to make his films, whether it's the costumes in this one, the way he shot, 3D stuff for Avatar, things that he did for Titanic and a bunch of other things. I feel like, he's got like patents on a bunch of stuff that's probably making him a bunch of extra money.
Dan, what did you think of the dive suits and the look of those? Because I mean, like I said, Cameron designed a lot of this for this film.
Yeah, it's the same answer. It's all part of the character of the film, the very precise place that it is. I say it's semi-futuristic. I'm not sure if they ever state a year in which it's set, but it all adds to make this movie look distinctive from other underwater movies, from films of the time. And watching it back now again, oddly, I think it still works. I think it still looks semi-futuristic as well. Nothing dates but quicker, does it, than stuff that's meant to look like it's from the future. And yet, there's something about this.
Yeah, it looks like it could be used in the here and now, Lacey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the technology kind of part of it, but I will say that when it comes down to it, one night wearing that overalls, that's like a great random thing for a person to be wearing underwater, and that's just fun, and that's just kind of
that was my vote. Kimberly Scott wearing the overalls and then the cowboy hat. That was kind of cool.
And then Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, she shows up wearing flannel. Like most of what she wears underwater is flannel, which is kind of weird. And I think that's just an interesting choice. It kind of gives that Midwestern feel, even though they're in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool. The don't get me wrong, the technology and the suits and all that kind of stuff, it's all really interesting. But fashion wise, I mean, it's hard to pull off, Texan like cowboy underwater. That's a hard sell, and she did it well.
There you go. But there is one more fashion statement that I want to talk about in this film. Have any of you breathed your liquid oxygen lately?
I know what you're talking about. What are you talking about?
One of the big debates about this film was the technology used of liquid breathing. Liquid breathing is a form of respiration in which normally air-breathing organisms breathes an oxygen-rich liquid which is capable of CO2 gas exchange. This is called polyfluorocarbon. The liquid involved requires certain physical properties such as respiratory gas solubility, density, viscosity, vapor pressure, and lipid solubility, which some perfluorochemicals, PFCs, have. Thus, it is critical to choose the appropriate PFC for a specific biomedical application such as liquid ventilation, drug delivery, or blood substitutes. The physical properties of PFC liquids vary substantially. However, the one common property is their high solubility for respiratory gases. In fact, these liquids carry more oxygen and carbon dioxide than human blood. In theory, liquid breathing could assist in the treatment of patients with severe pulmonary or cardiac trauma, especially in pediatric cases. Liquid breathing has also been proposed for use in deep diving and space travel. Despite some recent advances in liquid ventilation, a standard mode of application has not been yet established. As a New York Times piece notes, Balduric, the human preflotation test subject, nearly died, and the movie stars are less expendable than rats. Harris was the only actor in The Abyss who had to endure the breathing fluid. In one of the more memorable scenes of the deep suit, his character, Bud Brinkman, stares intently into the eyes of his estranged wife as the suit's helmet steadily fills with pink-toned fluid. In reality, just out of frame, the crew simply pumped colored water into Harris's helmet. It was up to Harris to go through the motions of panic and amazement that he could, in fact, breathe underwater, which, to reiterate, he could not. Like Bud, Harris wore a custom contact lens in order to see inside a fluid-filled helmet. And this one's just for you, Dan. Real oxygenated fluid, carbon fluid, was used in the rat fluid breathing scene. Dr. Johannes Kleistra and Dr. Peter Bennett of Duke University pioneered this technique and consulted on the film, giving detailed instructions on how to prepare the fluid. The only reason for cutting to the actors' faces was to avoid showing the rat defecating from momentary panic as they began to breathing the fluid.
Oh.
After all that, Kevin, I feel Haley Stoddard from Union Federation should be here.
I know, right? Yeah. I think the closest I ever feel coming to that was when I drink Pepto-Bismol. So yeah.
I am just curious, what were your guys' thoughts on this whole concept and scene in the film? Because I know for a lot of people, this was a concept that took a lot of people out of the movie, the whole liquid breathing. Lacey, let's start with you.
Didn't bother me in the least. Very specific statement made. We all did this for 9 months. Your body just has to get used to it again. That is, whether it's true or not, that is a valid statement that was made in the film, and my suspension of disbelief made it fine.
Dan?
I agree completely with everything Lacey's just said. It sounds feasible. It's it's believable in that moment, and that's all I really need at that given moment in a movie of this nature. It was a fascinating concept and idea, really, really well realized. I've no idea how they did it until you explained it. No, I think you'd have to be. Yeah, I know that some of us. Again, it's different strokes for different folks, isn't it? People take different things from movies, and maybe the more scientifically minded struggle with things like this. I think it's all part of the fun.
All right, Kevin, you've been breathing underwater fluid throughout the podcast, right?
Yeah, that's how I'm surviving this. I thought it was an interesting concept. I was fascinated by it. I thought, it was a tough watch to see a rat go through that, and I see why people have issues with that. But it was a fascinating concept, and I believed everything I saw.
There we go. Well, moving on, guys, real quick to the Harry Met Sally best scene or moment between two characters. I have my personal opinion on it. It's right. It's this sub scene between Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth. This is just, it's intense. Dan, you talked about this a little earlier.
Yeah.
You really feel the connection there between the two with that. I think it's very well done. I think the other one that a lot of people go to is when Bud goes over the edge into the abyss, and the conversation with Bud typing while she's talking to him. You're just so pulled into the intenseness of that. But guys, what about you? What is your favorite scene between two characters in this? Lacey.
The scene in the helicopter. No, the submarine is fantastic, but I think that it is nicely paired with the resuscitation scene when everyone kind of gives up and Ed Harris just basically like smacks her a couple times and screams like, "You never gave up on anything in your life, you bitch. Don't give up. You don't give up now." That's like a solid. I mean, that was intense. I think that was a really good. I mean, granted, she didn't have a lot to say during that particular scene.
That line was in the trailer as well, but you couldn't see the context. I think that was one of the last moments in the trailer that made you think, "Wow, were you?"
Yeah, and it's a great line, and I think that showed everything you needed to know about him and her and their relationship was right there. Just that one line where he was just not going to have it. Like, that's it. We're fixing this. We're making this work. I don't care if I have to beat the crap out of her to get her to come back. Like, she was willing to to do anything he needed to do to get her back.
Kevin, what about you?
I think when she first arrives and there's tension between them, and he's showing her where she's going to be staying, and they, she makes a comment about the wedding ring, and he's asking about, who she's still seeing and stuff. That's a scene that I like between those two.
You kind of talked about the scene with the sub. Anything else you want to add to that?
I can't see past that scene. I can't, because everything else that I enjoyed, if I'm being honest, majority of it was between those two characters. If I've got an issue with this movie, I think that some of the villainy is a little phony from Michael Biehn.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're gonna get into actually that here shortly. But guys, before you mentioned Michael Biehn, that transitions into, I don't know who you are and you will kill me, because it is time for the Sean Bean Award Best Death Scene. And guys, come on, if this isn't unanimous, we're going to have a serious problem in this podcast, because there is no better death scene than Lieutenant Coffee imploding in the sub, guys.
That's a good one. That one wins. Yeah.
Lacey?
Yes, that's a fantastic scene, but realistically, Lindsay did die.
Yes.
And that scene hit me harder than Lieutenant Coffee dying. So as far as like cool deaths, okay, imploding in a submarine, but the fact that she was literally giving her life to save someone else, that kind of, I feel like she wins this one.
Right,
see, Lacey,
fair.
I was never convinced. I was never sure why Coffee was so annoyed and so ferociously hostile to everybody all the time. I think if this movie has got a flaw, and I don't like to level it at Michael Biehn because I like this actor so much, I think it's in the villainy, in the antagonism between the characters. I don't think it quite comes off, and as such, I don't feel this in the way that I should. But I think it's a spectacular moment.
It's interesting that because it's only discussed like in 2 or 3 sentences here or there, and because Lieutenant Coffey does shut her down, he's like, we've all done test dives, it's fine, whatever. The fact of the matter is that because he is a soldier and because he has a singular goal, okay, and that is a goal that no one else has, because he is sent he has a second mission, whereas the rest of the soldiers are just there to help, So I think that the fact that, what do they call it? Sickness. What kind of sickness is it? The whatever
sickness. The bends.
Right.
The bends.
Okay, so that has been known to cause outbursts. You get hallucinations, all that kind of stuff. So I think that that's there, and I think the fact that he is a soldier who is dealing with potentially a nuclear weapon or
it's all starting to come back to me now you're explaining it, but I think in 2.5 hours, however long it was, the version that I saw, I think they could have found a little more time to explore that in a more kind of rounded way.
Listen, we're going to get to that in a minute, guys. Right. But up next, it's the "Are you sure that wasn't real?" special effects moment of the film, and I think, guys, again, this is the one that everybody was talking about when this movie came out, was the water effect, the alien using the water to manipulate and match faces on this. It was something everybody just was raving about. To create the alien water tentacle camera, initially considered cell animation or a tentacle sculpted in clay and then animated via stop motion techniques with water reflections projected onto it. Phil Tippett suggests Cameron work with Industrial Light and Magic. The visual effects work was divided up among 7 FX divisions, with motion control work by DreamQuest Images and computer graphics and opticals by ILM. ILM designed a program to produce surface water of differing sizes and kinetic properties for the pseudopod, which was referred to by ILM informally as the water weenie. For the moment when it mimics Bud and Lindsay's faces, Ed Harris had 8 of his facial expressions scanned, while 12 of Mastriano's were scanned via software used to create CGI sculptures. The set was photographed from every angle and digitally recreated so that the pseudopod could be accurately composited into the live action footage. For the sequence where Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio touches the surface of the pseudopod, the ILM receptionist Ala Aga stood in as a hand model. The company spent 6 months to create 75 seconds of computer graphics needed for this creature. This was so complicated, it actually delayed the film by a month, because it was originally supposed to be a 4th of July film, but to finish out these effects, they needed another few weeks to get them completed. Guys, this is obviously pre-Terminator 2. This really kind of, I think, was the opening of this particular type of door of effects, Kevin.
Yep, pre-Michael Jackson's black and white video as well.
Yeah, this was the shining moment of special effects anywhere at this time. This type of imagery that we're seeing, and this obviously led to, of course, James Cameron topping himself with Terminator 2, and this was trying to be duplicated by many movies after this, and but who did it best was the guy that started it, was this type of imagery, and this is what everyone was talking about. It's like, oh, we got to see these aliens, this is really, really cool. And there's also a really nice moment because we get a feeling that these aliens aren't out to kill everyone, and these are friendly aliens if you don't threaten them, of course, if you don't coffee them, and so this was a nice moment, like this image that you have here on YouTube, Kyle, is that you get to see that, hey, we're friendly, we're gonna, we can change our face to match yours and blah blah blah. And even when they when he shuts the door and the water then just drops, that itself was a really cool effect too. And it was cutting edge at the time. People were taking note, and that's a reason why they won an Oscar for their special effects on this.
Yep. Lacey?
Ditto. Everything that you both just said is, it was just so cool at the time. I mean, again, first time I see this, I'm 16 years old. This has never been, I've never seen this kind of, and this was leaps and bounds from the prior, special effects and whatnot that were used. I mean, notoriously, water, fire, and hair were the three things that CGI just couldn't get right. And this apparently made huge leaps and bounds technologically, so that they were able to use some of the same mastering techniques for the CGI in like later progress, and now we've got these amazing, you know, CGI where it's photo real almost for water and fire and hair, fur on animals. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Dan, what was your impression of the effect when this first time you saw it?
At the time, this was, I wouldn't say it was all everybody was talking about, but certainly it was all that sci-fi geeky kids like me were really interested in, because they show you snippets of these sequences on promotional shows, TV shows, and things. And but I'd forgotten how good it was, and I was surprised how good it still looks, particularly all of this and that moment, as you said, Kev, where the tentacle gets cut off by the door, and it just seamlessly turns back to water. Extraordinary. I think it still looks great.
Well, guys, up next, it's the Fall Guy Stunt or Best Action Sequence Award. And I think for me personally, that award goes to the subchase scene. I think that scene is just intense. How they're maneuvering those subs, using them to chase each other. The stakes are incredibly high in it, and just a masterful job of the people who are actually driving those subs underwater and making them maneuver like they did. I thought it was masterful. Do you guys have any favorite stunt moments, Kevin?
I just want to give a shout out to the entire cast of having to do this underwater, training and doing all of this. I'm going to give it to all of them personally, because I wouldn't do this. I just said, no. I'm up on the boat with Chris Elliott. That's where I am.
Yeah. You are the Chris Elliott role in that case, Kevin. Even then, you're going through a hurricane, so it's not exactly like it's wonderful up above too. Lacey, what about you? A favorite action moment or stunt moment?
You know, I do love this chase, but I think I'm going to go back and take it back to that fight with Ed Harris and Michael Biehn. And I know earlier I accidentally called him Catfish Tex, because my brain was apparently on Aliens or something again, or Alien was Tex. Anyway, so Catfish coming in and like whacking them. That whole fight scene that's a lot of stunt work for. That had to have taken 4 or 5 days of coordination. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Dan?
I agree with you. I think it's this chase scene. I'm convinced that their lives are in danger. And more to the point, I'm convinced it's them piloting these things. Yeah, it's great.
Okay, guys, this is where things get real interesting for the Abyss. It is the Twin Suns' favorite filming location or set piece. And guys, this is something that the Abyss kind of became famous for, because Cameron had originally planned to shoot on location in the Bahamas where the story was set, but quickly realized that he needed to have a completely controlled environment because of the stunts and special visual effects involved. He considered shooting the film in Malta, which had the largest unfiltered tank of water, but it was not adequate for Cameron's needs. Underwater sequences for the film were shot at a unit of the Gaffney Studios situated south of Cherokee Falls outside Gaffney, South Carolina, which had been abandoned by Duke Power officials after previously spending $700 million constructing the Cherokee nuclear power plant, along with Owensby Street, Gaffney, South Carolina. 2 specially constructed tanks were used. The first one based on an abandoned plant's primary reactor containment vessel held 7.5 million U.S. gallons of water, was 55 feet deep and 209 feet across. At the time, it was the largest freshwater filtered tank in the world. The additional scenes were shot in the second tank and unused turbine pit, which held 2.5 million U.S. gallons of water. As the production crew rushed to finish painting the main tank, millions of gallons of water poured in, and it took 5 days to fill. The deep core rig was anchored to a 90-ton concrete column at the bottom of the large tank. It consisted of 6 partial and complete modules that took over half a year to plan and build from scratch. Filming was also done at the largest underground lake in the world, a mine in Bon Terre, Missouri, which was the background for several underwater shots. This is maybe one of the things that this film is famous for, Kevin, was the filming location, filming it in these huge tanks.
Yeah, I remember seeing the documentary about that, and these pictures that you're showing showed all of this, and it's it's one of those things where as a filmmaker you want to be able to control the elements and have them go in your favor as opposed to just going somewhere on a shooting location, because then you got to deal with the weather there and whatever issues that come up. And if you can just build an entire tank or use an existing one in this case and then customize it to your needs, then you have complete control of your environment. And it was fascinating to see this, because I remember when I was first watching this going, I'm like, where in the ocean did they go drop this? Were they actually there in the ocean? And I'm like, man, this is amazing. And then seeing how they did this, it makes sense.
Dan, what about you? I mean, this is a filming engineering masterpiece.
Yeah, I mean, I struck looking at the pictures, and I've seen these pictures before, and I've been told all the facts and figures before, but it never stops being surprising, because just as you say, Kev, you're convinced that they are where they say they are at any given time. I know that's the magic of movie making. But now when I see some of these pictures, I think, well, actually, we live in the age of the volume and all these various places, huge studios and sound stages. So it looks quite sort of small in some respects. But as you say, I mean, it's completely sort of immersive, isn't it? You're controlling literally everything all around your in front of you, behind you, top and bottom. My, what a feat! And to have done this as well all those decades ago.
Yeah.
And it's also really cool how they controlled the light by using basically a precursor to Orbeez. They put hashed up tiny little balls of black plastic across the top, so they could come up through it and it would still not give light underneath. So they could control shooting during the daytime and still get full underwater, because they tried a tarp originally. It's really cool, that part of the documentary talking about, it's Galen Hurd talking about how somebody finally realized, well, those things you put in a vase to make sure that your flowers stand straight up. Well, if we can get about 70 million of those, we can cover the top layer. So apparently there was a layer about this thick of teeny tiny little black plastic balls that would float across the top, so that no light would get through while they were filming underneath, and they could control all the lighting as well. It's really fascinating, talking about the locations that they used.
So resourceful and inventive.
Indeed. Kyle's on mute.
Kyle, you're on mute, buddy.
Yeah, the deep water. I'm shaking a little bit here, apparently. But next we got, if you are non-speaking extra on set, what scene do you want to be in, guys? Dan, I'm gonna start with you. What scene would you want to be in if you were non-speaking extra?
What scene would I want to be in? Oh, my God, in a film like this? I'm not sure I want to be in any of them. I think I'd kind of like to walk around on the surface of the alien spacecraft, I was going to call it, at the end. Because I think I'd like to, I'd wonder how it would feel underfoot. I doubt they'd let me take my shoes and socks off to find out, but yeah, maybe that.
Lacey, you've been shaking your head. You just want no part of this, I'm taking.
No, thank you. No, thank you. Good.
Kevin?
Yeah, put me on top of that boat with Chris Elliott, or rando guy on the alien being raised while, my boat's being raised up. I don't want it anywhere underwater at all.
Okay, I have to address this. The number of people who are in that ship. I mean, that ship is easily has 15,000 sailors on it, right? Every single one of those soldiers has a broken leg or a broken arm or some sort of like missing teeth after coming up, and the boat is like on it's at like a 45-degree angle. Everyone in that boat is injured. No one on that boat is okay. You guys have got to, like, that's crazy pants. That, ouch, lots of ouch.
Yeah, I'll give you that. But guys, too, the Luke and Leia cringeworthy moment or scene and pet peeves here, and I kind of have a big one here. It's the resurrection of Lindsay in this scene. It is a very powerful scene, but this scene goes on a bit too long. You get uncomfortable by the end of this scene of how long this scene has gone on. It's very powerful. I get it. I understand it. But yeah, and I know this is for a lot of people. She is down for so long that, and just the intensity of it, and a lot of people say, as great as this scene can be, it really takes you out of everything else that is in the movie. And you read the stories about what she went through during filming this scene. Yeah, this just gets to be feeling a little bit uncomfortable for me, guys. Kevin, do you have some pet peeves on that you want to address?
Yeah, there's pacing issues with this movie for me, even in the regular version of it. And you know, I realize that this is an underwater film, but it would have been nice to get some type of backstory with whatever it is above water, and then we dive into it and stuff. And I just felt that there's certain scenes that were a little prolonged, that could have been cut for time, because it still affects I like this movie, but it has affected my enjoyment of this movie over the years because of the pacing of it.
Lacey, you look like you had something you wanted to add when I was talking about the scene earlier.
Yeah, the number one rule of emergency medicine is that you're not dead until you're warm and dead. So just in real life, like that is a rule in every emergency room on the planet. You're not dead until you are warm and dead. So the colder the ice, the colder the water, the better chance she had of being revived. And I think that number one, you know what, I could Grey's Anatomy this for 20 minutes, but I think that the amount of time it took for her to come back was it was not inversely, but it was required because she was too cold to be physically functional for a certain amount. She had to get a certain amount of regain a certain amount of heat before she could become but that's I mean, I don't have any specific issues with the film. I think that, look, I got a degree in screenwriting. I'm always going to stand up for the guy who's written the movie. You know what I mean? So I think that Cameron deliberately paced it the way he did. And none of it bothered me in particular. And like I said, I do prefer the extended edition because I feel like that gives us more information. But I didn't have any nitpicks on this one. No.
Dan?
Yeah, I agree that I love that scene. I think it's fantastic. It is slightly too long, but it wouldn't need to. It probably does need to be that long. But the problem it creates, or the problem it exacerbates, is the fact that it is so exhausting, so draining emotionally that the film never recovers from it. So you want it to be over because you can't really take any more. For me, the best scene is where she drowns by a country mile. That's where the film peaks. This is the conclusion. And so to go on to give us another conclusion afterwards, in fact, maybe even two, it's just far, far too much. By the end of this, I'm done. I want the credits to roll up. I'm happy to have seen pretty much everything that we saw later on in the film, but it should have been moved dramatically earlier because the film after this, the audience, I don't think you can recover from this, and everything that comes afterwards seems like it's kind of belonging of a different movie, as I said before. So I think that's not just a pet peeve. I think that's a major, major flaw with this film. I remember noticing it when I saw it in the cinema when I was 16, being kind of, washed out. Was there more? And I certainly feel like that now. So, yeah, and all that, obviously, that's got to be laid at Cameron's door.
Well, guys, I have one huge hair-pulling nitpick pet peeve about this film. How can we go from this amazingly beautiful underwater alien ship city to this when it comes in up where it looks like poor man's effects styrofoam, completely changes its color, and it just takes you so out of the end of the movie, at least for me. I think this is one of my biggest problems with The Abyss. Is
because I was out already because of what I've just said. Yeah, I did. You're right.
The way this looks above water just completely takes me out of the end of this film, and it's my biggest pet peeve of the movie.
It looks like it's from a kids' film. It looks like it's Flight of the Navigator 2, where it's a bigger ship or something.
Why didn't they make it? Why didn't they go with like the translucent still look of it even above water? I don't understand that. It's kind of like watching, like, it looks like the remnants of like a dead alien animal being.
I think the
resurfaced,
idea is that
you know?
it belongs in the water, that it functions, that it was deliberately created to function.
Lacey,
It's functioning technology that functions in the water.
I'm going to give that to the aliens deciding that they need to look benign, non-aggressive. And if anything I've learned from owning a house and being under construction and all that kind of stuff, the color that they use for all your open houses is called non-offensive gray. And it's like a gray, like basic, boring. And I think that's what they did here. I think the aliens made a deliberate decision to change their look so that they looked like they were benign and non-aggressive. And that's just their story, and they're sticking to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's very Gene
I think
Roddenberry.
there's some point to that, Lacey. Well said.
I mean,
there you go.
who knows? Also sponsored by Play School. Sorry.
Okay, guys. I'm King of the World. This is the Titanic I'm King of the World career moment. Was an actor in this movie at the top of their career, or was anything else from this movie trending, newsworthy, tabloid popular when this movie was released? So, Dan, actually, I'll start with you. Anything King of the World for you? Is anybody at the top of their game? Is this, or is this just like this movie is there and it exists?
Well, I think Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio was, if not a name on everybody's lips, because it takes you so long to say it. She was one of the faces of the late 80s. I became kind of enchanted by her, really, in The Colour of Money with Tom Cruise and Paul Newman. That's my favourite film of hers. And afterwards, she did the Robin Hood film, didn't she? So she is synonymous with, I think, the late 80s. But I don't think she was ever really a star. She's
I think her two biggest films are this one and in '91 for Robin Hood. Yeah.
Maybe The Perfect Storm as well, but
you don't remember.
She was in that. Yeah, no, I can't remember her being in that.
I think Robin Hood is probably her apex.
I mean, I think that the star of this film is James Cameron. He's not even on screen, and that's despite the incredible performances by her and Ed Harris and several other key people. I think maybe it's hindsight that makes me feel that way, but it's almost as if James Cameron's there somehow.
Yeah.
It also doesn't help that she and Madeline Stowe fought for every role because they were so similar in their look that literally everything you find, like you talk about,
the style of acting is the same as well, isn't it?
And they're the same age, they're the same height, they have the same like facial structure, they have the same color hair.
Mary though, she had one thing that over Stowe that I thought was cool, is that her hair was a little extra curly, especially in Robin Hood. It was just like the hair was epic in that.
Right.
You know, that was one of the things that was very captivating about her. But yeah, you could say that this and Robin Hood are definitely in the King of the World moment there.
Yeah, but the other thing with Mastrantonio is, when you were talking about Dennis Quaid and Mastrantonio a few minutes ago, I was like, oh, they were in a movie together called Playing by Heart 10 years later. And then in my head, I was like, wait, was that her? And then, no, it was Madeline Stowe. Because they are, I do mistake the two of them.
Yeah.
I kind of think that this might be a good kind of top of the pile for Michael Biehn, because right after this he did Navy SEALs, but before this, so he had Aliens, sorry, but and then you get, I guess Tombstone was 2-3 years later, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think this is kind of the beginning. People knew who he was from Aliens, right?
Yeah.
But this might be the kind of the next notch where he started to become more of like not just that guy. People started like remembering his name.
I think the answer for this, for me personally, is it's King of the World for CGI at the moment, because it's changed.
That's where I was going with it, Kyle.
Yeah,
that's it. The special effects are King of the World moment in this. That's where I was going with it.
Also, dive equipment, modernizing dive equipment.
Yeah. I was going with the effects. That was my vote.
So CGI can have a King of the World moment, but Ed Harris can't be a vehicle. Whatever.
Okay, guys, it's time for the Nuke It From Orbit hot take. It's the only way to be sure. Kevin, you have been sitting on something since the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah, my hot take is that of all the Cameron films, this is my least favorite. It's for me, it's harder to watch. It's not. It's becoming a less rewatchable for me. I watch parts of it, but um, when this thing was coming out on 4K, Kyle, we were all really excited about it because it was part of this group of Cameron films that we've been waiting for 4K or even Blu-ray versions, like True Lies. We were waiting for that version, and his films deserve this type of treatment because how visually awesome all of his films are. But when I'm looking at all of his films, and I remember we did Couch Potato Theaters on Terminator, we did Couch Potato Theaters on Aliens, and we did Couch Potato Theater on True Lies. And so I've been, rewatching a lot of his stuff. And I made a comment that my favorite James Cameron film as of now is True Lies for many, many reasons. And I made the case for that on that podcast. If you want to know why how I made the case for it, go watch and listen to that. And I made my case for it. I think this film for me is the least watchable of all of the Cameron films. I even love Titanic. I usually watch like the first half or the first three quarters of Titanic, and then I'm kind of done with it after it sinks and everyone dies, because I love all the drama up to it. I love the beauty of the Titanic itself. But this one's a tough watch for me now. I do enjoy it, but when it came out in 4K, I was trying to remember the last time I saw it. I got to tell you, it might have been 15 years for these reasons. And I hadn't gone to that special edition, that 2-disc DVD one that's been around for a while, that you showcased, Lacey, there. And I just, there's certain pacing issues that I have with this film. But yeah, I even went into Letterboxd. I had this thing ranked at a 4-star out of 5. I dropped it down to a 3. And of all the Cameron films I've ranked on Letterboxd, it's the lowest ranked one.
Interesting. Well, Kevin, I'm just I got to give you something here.
Yeah, bomb.
Hot take for this, but guys, as we begin to wrap things up here, final thoughts on The Abyss. Lacey, I'll let you kick things off here as the queen of movies.
I think it's one of those things where because I have a degree in film, because I lived in Los Angeles, because I worked in the industry for a while, I think there are things that make me love this movie that maybe someone who hasn't had those experiences are going to just be like, okay, well, whatever. It was cool, but I'm not going to watch it again. I find that when I watch it, I'm looking at all kinds of different things. I'm watching I don't know. I very much enjoy this film. I think that it is one that every time I watch it, I have a different feeling about it, which is different. And that's not something that I get with a lot of different movies. Like I said, when I watched it at 16, it was about the fun, new, awesome, technology. And then it was later about relationships and that kind of stuff. And then it was, so there's different ways to watch this movie. And I think every time I watch it, I see a different, I think the external, like my outside life affects how I see this movie. And I think that's an interesting thing to kind of gauge my life. Every time I watch this movie, I go, oh, okay, so now I'm looking at the geopolitical aspects of it. And now I'm looking at so yeah, I dig it. 2 thumbs up, guys.
Mr. Hadley, I know it is getting incredibly late for you over there on the other side of the pond, as
it
they
is.
say over here. So please give me your final thoughts on
this. Look, since I turned 50 years of age, I think about death most days now. And as such, what I found is that there are some movies that I'm starting to wonder, will I ever watch it again? And this is one of them. Because, and I probably will, I might, particularly if Lacey sorts me out there. But I think that the only real reason I would watch this again is for that sort of 15 to 20 minutes of it, which I think are electrifying. And some of the nostalgia value which it may accrue in further intervening years. But it is, Kev's right. This is technically, it's incredible what James Cameron managed to achieve with this. It is a quintessential film of its time, of the late 80s. It was immensely exciting back then. And the poster, I'm more fond of the poster than I am of the film. Is that bad? I'm a graphic designer, so it's probably not that bad. Yeah, I'd say it's for completists, only for 80s enthusiasts, essentially. And is it Cameron's worst film? Yeah, probably not. But it's certainly the one that I enjoy the very least. Thank you for inviting me to watch it again. I'm glad I've seen it again, because it had been a long, long time. But heaven knows when, if ever, I'll bother again.
Mr. Reitzel.
I did enjoy returning to this film and noticing new things I didn't notice before whenever I do rewatch these films. And, I have this in my collection for that reason. And also the nostalgia of seeing it for the first time and just now being able to watch this on a really good 4K setup and screen and such. My only issue with the 4Ks, the re-releases, and I gotta be honest with you, is the reimagined of the covers instead of just using some of the classic posters and stuff like that. And I wasn't a fan of the Aliens one too, where I thought they should have just used the original poster or something like that. That's my only issue. I was fine with the Terminator one. I was fine with True Lies, because True Lies was a little more to the original poster and such. But besides that, though, the movie itself has a certain place in history, and that's something that I respect and I love looking back on. And, when it comes down to a sit down of watching this film, it's usually I'll just have it on the background nowadays, unless someone who hasn't seen it before. Because then whenever I watch a movie that I either like or find intriguing and with someone that hasn't seen it before, I always like to see their first time perspective of things, and see if they ask any certain questions or like, what the hell's going on? I'm not one of those people that are going to talk through the film and ruin it, but I'll wait for them to kind of say, what's this about? I said, well, I got an answer, or I got my opinion on it, so. But it's a crowning achievement in technology at its time, and it should be celebrated because of that.
For me, The Abyss is one of my favorite Cameron films. I don't know. There's just something about it with the storyline and everything underwater I'm a huge fan of. I think the technological achievements he achieved with this film are just outstanding. And I really think it was a turning moment for Cameron, especially on the technological side, because I really think and it obviously also developed Cameron's sense for the love of diving and underwater, which is everything with Titanic. I really think this was a movie that put Cameron really on the full path of what James Cameron has evolved into. And I think that's a big thing with that. It's one of my favorite Ed Harris's performances. I think there's just amazing things visually with this movie that make me pull me in. This movie is not perfect. It has its flaws, but I think it's a very important movie. And I think for me, it probably falls probably Aliens, then True Lies, then this for me. And I think it's partly because I just love the underwater work and I love the performances in it. And that's what I enjoy for it. And I think it is one of those movies for me at any rate. I can pop in at any time and kind of pick up where it is. And then if I want to pop out, I can pop out. So it works that way too as a couch potato film, in my opinion. So it's been very interesting to talk about, because I do think this is a movie that gives people a lot of different perspectives. And I think about the flaws of it, it does feel like one of those movies that it appeals to you at different age points and you see it from different versions, which is very interesting for a film. Usually you don't see that quite so often. And I think that's something that speaks to this film in different ways. But I have had a great time talking this James Cameron film with this amazing crew. Kevin, you have held it together very well considering all the shakiness.
I know what you're talking about. Well done on the notes and the research on this, Kyle. Well done. Well done.
Thank you, sir. Of course, you have been watching Couch Potato here on the Fandom Podcast Network. It's a new year. We're excited. We got a lot of great things planned at the Fandom Podcast Network, not only with things Kevin and I do, but of course, Dan with everything he does with Type 40, which if you are not listening to Type 40 or even listening to things he does with the Spacebook, Dan, you have done a fantastic job. We are so proud of you and so honored to have you as part of the network and with your entire crew of TARDIS drivers, because I don't think anybody is really the companion over at Type 40.
No, we're also companions of one another. We take it in turns with our hands on the helmet regulator, I suppose you could say, but yeah.
Yeah, but nobody tells Charlotte that.
No. Just But
make sure you check out episodes of Type 40. But Dan, where can people find you on social media besides Type 40?
On social media, but you find me on Type 40 at Instagram and X at Type40 Doctor Who, and that's where you can get all that, or the home feed at type40.podbean.com for that. There's the Type40 YouTube channel as well, where you get all the video editions and some extra Type 40s and other kinds of experimental stuff that we try over there. So there's all of that. But if you want to speak to me about all things geeky outside of the TARDIS, you can come find me on Instagram and X as the Spacebook. I'm there wheezing and groaning and ranting and raving with whatever's got my goat or my dander up that day. So yeah, come and look me up and check me out. God, that sounded bad. Sounded like my Tinder listing then, didn't it? What's going on?
After Dan's whole speech, PBS just solicited me. So, Lacey, where can people find you on the socials?
I am Lacy Pants on all of the places except for Instagram, where I locked myself out of my Lacy Pants, and now I'm the Lacy Pants.
Could happen to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Wright, so not only can we find you, but where can we find the Fandom Podcast Network?
Well, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network, first of all, here on YouTube. Please subscribe, share out, and leave comments. We appreciate that. We're also on Facebook. Fandom Podcast Network is also on X, Instagram, and now Blue Sky. Just look for Fandom Podcast Network. I think it's FanPod Network on Blue Sky and X, and Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram. And you can find me. I'm Kevin. I'm also on Facebook as well. You can also find me on all of the main socials, including Letterboxd and X and Instagram at Spartan _ Phoenix. And I'm also on Blue Sky at Spartan Phoenix.
And of course, you can find me, Kyle, on Facebook. You can find me all over the Fandom Podcast Network. You can find me on X at AKyleW. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at AKyle or at AKyle Fandom. You can find me on Blue Sky at AKyleW. And you can find me swimming around in deep trenches randomly across the globe. Guys, this has been a wonderful edition of Couch Potato Theater as we continue our James Cameron film retrospective, thanks to these wonderful 4K releases. And guys, to close out, a huge thank you for all coming on this, especially you, Dan. I know it is very late over on your side of the pond, but I am so glad whenever you are able to join us for anything here at the.
He's got an after podcast he's going to.
Yeah, exactly. He still has another live.
Wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Exactly. So, yeah. Wake up, Dan. Exactly. So, guys, I'm just going to tell you, keep your pantyhose on, because we will be back on the couch again soon. With that, guys, have a great night, and we will see you soon.